Coming up on tonight's episode of Change Mode, Dan and I take on Swift, Apple's new programming language, as we try and write to-do apps for the iPhone. This is Change Mode, episode number 6, recorded July 22nd, 2014. The Change Mode Challenge, number 2, Swift.
The Change Mode Show, episode number 6, we're doing the Swift Challenge. With me, as always, is Colby Rabideau, illustrious co-host and developer extraordinaire. So, just a reminder, coffeeandbeer.tv is where you can get this show and all the past episodes of this show and all the past and future episodes of Don't Panic, our sister show, and actually all the future episodes. They'll all be there. So, a month ago, 2 months ago, when did we issue this challenge? It was a while ago.
I think it was shortly after the Go Challenge, which was 2 episodes ago. So
and was definitely in May.
Yeah. I actually think it might be a month and a week because we unplanned skipped last week, didn't we?
Yeah, we delayed. Swift Challenge. Quick background on Swift. Swift is a programming language recently released by Apple, but has been in development for a long time. They haven't open sourced it yet. We can talk about that later. They've been pretty open, not necessarily open source, but pretty open about the language and how they came to develop it, and it was actually pretty cool seeing a programming language discussed at WWDC, which, despite that it is a developers conference, has typically been pretty producty and not nerdy enough for me at all. They'll sometimes have one side like 20,000 new APIs, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, that's a big number. That must be great." I'm not convinced that's a big number. It's always a big number, and I am not an Apple developer, but that seems, I don't know if that's a plus, but I guess it's cool. I feel like only like 6 of those are cool. It's like, oh man, like HealthKit and HomeKit and CloudKit. Those are cool. What are the other 1,000? I don't know. Anyways, Swift. So we issued the Swift Challenge. Could we write a graphical to-do list app for the iPhone in Swift in a month, or 6 weeks, or 7 weeks? 7 weeks, yeah. And we're about to find out if we could, in fact, do that. Before we get too much into it, the first hurdle was probably getting Xcode set up. Did you have any problems with this, Colby?
Getting Xcode set up.
Well, there's more. You have to first get the version of Xcode that you would need to run Swift.
Yeah, so at the time when I got Xcode, when I got it, you had to have a developer subscription. So I paid for another year of the Apple.
You paid for it?
I did, because I was too lazy to figure out how to do it at work. And this way it's mine, and I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't like being beholden to people.
Yeah, we'll get back. I ran into some interesting problems I probably could have caused by haphazardly using my work's Apple developer account when we get to my implementation.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
So
you need a developer account.
Right. You needed it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Has that changed?
I believe that has changed. In fact, if you just Google Swift programming language, the first link is this new page that Apple has. And in resources, I think you can just download Xcode 6 Beta 4. And as long as you have... I'm going to try this with my personal account and see if it works. But yeah, normally you would have had to have a developer account, which is $100 a year, for iOS or OS X. But if you wanted both, they're separate and they each pay $100 a year. Yeah, I was able to download it from my personal account. And actually, it's my understanding that what's the new version? Yosemite will also be open beta soonish. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, that is kind of cool. Thinking about it, I'm not sure I really understand why Apple would make you pay for the Xcode beta. I can see how historically they might have done that for Mac, right? Because there was no they want to make money off of people making programs for their system, right? And there was no App Store on Mac, so they weren't making money that way. So they charge you for the beta. So maybe it's just historical, but that's not the problem.
I don't think it was for money-making reasons. I think, first of all, they used to be under NDA. So if you were an Apple developer and you downloaded beta software at all, you couldn't talk about it.
Right.
So that's probably part of it. But another part of it is just imagine, especially on iOS, but with Xcode too, imagine just any person, you say, oh, there's a new Xcode 6 beta is out. Let me download it and use it because it's free. When in fact, you need to really understand what you're doing there because it probably will not work. In fact, it doesn't work, as we'll find out later. And if someone just downloads that and decides, oh, this doesn't work, I'm not going to develop for the Apple platform because it's stupid. Or they have been developing for it and they download the Xcode 6 beta and it's new and it's free and it stops working, they might have, similar negative thoughts. So I understand why they charged for it. I think it's good that they don't. But with Apple especially, people just love to get their hands on it as soon as they can. I feel like a lot of people get the developer account for iOS just to get the new iOS builds early, despite the fact that they don't even work. So I think that's reasonable, but I'm glad. We'll see how it seems to be working just fine to not have the pay. So I'm glad. Let's talk about some. Oh well, it's OS 10 only. Once you get it, it's just like any other DMG file. It's great. We can talk about Xcode specific features now or later. I think later more when we actually show the program. Okay, yeah. So next, I wanted to dive into some language specifics that I really liked. Cool. Did you have any that you particularly liked, or should I just start going down some of the ones that I was a fan of?
So off the top of my head, to be fair, I will preface this by saying that I procrastinated very hard. And did not start my to-do list until last night. So, I'm probably a lot less familiar with this because I did not get as deep into it as I think you did. That being said, one of the things that struck me almost immediately is that it wasn't terrifying. It's like I've on multiple occasions, I have tried to get into iOS, doing iOS, and I think in both times, the thing that really brought me to a screeching halt was that I just didn't understand Objective-C enough to go off on my own. I know how to program. I can wrap my head around what's happening. What this code is supposed to be doing, but I couldn't just dick around and figure out what to do. Whereas I found with Swift, it was much easier for me to dick around and figure out what to do. I could reason about the answers because it's a lot more familiar. Not to say that Objective-C is bad. It's just to say that I don't know how to write Objective-C, and I don't mean to suggest that I know how to write Swift, but.
I think the technical programmer term, I put that in air quotes because it's only a programmer term and certainly isn't technical, is grokking. Have you heard this? That's always what I've imagined grokking to be like. You don't actually know what you're doing, but you know enough to kind of feel out the edges of what's going on and get a vague idea of what to try next. And you need to have some landmarks to do that. It's like going into a new city and you have absolutely no bearing of where you are. But on day 2 or 3, you're getting pretty good. It's like, there's the big church that goes over the street, and there's like the factory, and there's the dock. So now I know exactly where I am relative to important things. But all you really know is 3 things out of so much. So that's how I feel a lot of the times when I'm learning a new thing. And you're right. With Objective-C, I had the same reaction. Even just looking at the code, I never wanted to try it because I didn't know what it was. And this is coming from someone who does, like, I look at C++ code at least once a week, maybe a little less often, but it comes up, more than most web developers, I guess. Yeah. And even that is much less terrifying to me, mostly.
Than Objective-C, mostly.
Yeah, like if you get into like PHP source code where nothing is a raw C construct and it's all Zend functions everywhere, then I'm lost. But like even MySQL code, it's if statements and you can make out what's going on.
Yeah.
Not so with Objective-C, I found. That might be due to its weird small talk and C intermingling.
And
I'm
the
not
dashes.
sure.
The dashes.
The brackets, right?
Yeah.
Brackets are array accessing, and they are in C too. So, what
does it mean?
Yeah. So more specifically, and I'm interested in Colby's thoughts on this because I feel like I might come from a special place here. Swift has tuples, which I am a huge fan of. I love me some tuples. Colby, do you know what tuples are?
Well, a tuple's like a list of... It's like a fixed list. So you can return one or more things in a tuple, and like it's just a group of things. That's how I think of them. I don't know if that's actually true.
Yeah, so I was introduced to tuples in Erlang terms. And in Erlang terms, tuples are just, they're kind of like a struct. We should actually find out what a tuple is. So in Python, and I think this is true most places, a tuple is much like a list, except that it is immutable, unchangeable, once created, and hashable, thus suitable as a key in a dictionary, which I did not know and is kind of cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so in Erlang, most messages, for example, have a sender and then comma a message. Should that be a whole class? In most OO languages, probably. But in Erlang, it's just a tuple, and you can do pattern matching. So you can say, if the sender matches this other thing, then rip the message out. Now that's a string, and let's do something else with it. I just really like tuples as lightweight objects. And they also allow you to return multiple values from a function really easily, whereas in most languages, you end up returning a list, which is pretty heavy for what you want, or you return like comma separated things and then like pattern match on the other side, kind of, which is kind of cool. Anyways, I'm a fan of tuples.
Do people at Etsy use like the PHP list thing where you can return an array and then like splat out the like elements in the array into variables with using the list function?
Probably.
It's weird. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, it is a weird thing.
We use it for like some very Facebook specific things, like all the time. It's pretty common, but it's weird. It's so.
And the worst, to go off on a tangent, is when you pass an array into a constructor to make to rewrite optional parameters within PHP within that constructor. Basically, is what ends up happening. So you're like, I have so many parameters to my constructor. It's so ugly to write them all out, and I don't really want to have to think about sorting the required ones first and the other ones last. So I'm just going to make it an array So you have to read the entire constructor to actually figure out what's needed unless you document it. But even if you do, the documentation is going to break almost immediately. And then you're going to pass it in, and you lose all of the core language constructs that deal with this stuff. Terrible.
Yeah. That's a pretty common thing in JavaScript, but like there's no core language constructs anyway, really. So
there are no rules in JavaScript, so it's whatever.
Yeah.
Speaking of JavaScript, like JavaScript and Python, I noticed that Swift does a really good job of having good standard library support for functional things, like map and reduce and filter and all that stuff, which PHP definitely doesn't have. It kind of has it, but they are not named map, reduce, filter, or any of those things, and they don't always work like their closest analogous function. So yeah, I was really happy for that. My favorite thing that I found out late in the game, did you know, Colby? So, do you know what keywords Swift uses to describe a scope in a class? So, in Java, there's public, private, and protected. Right?
Keyword as in methods or like members?
Keywords. So the keywords that describe scope in Java are public, private, and protected.
Right. So, from what I did, I got let and var.
Well, those don't describe scope, do they? Those describe immutability.
Oh, I guess they describe... Yeah, you're right. Well, they describe, like... Yeah, whether it's an instance or an instance variable or a static thing. You're right. I don't know. I have no idea. I think all my methods, all of them are public.
So it has public, private, and internal, which I thought was a much better name than protected when you think about it.
Yeah.
Internal to the class or its subclasses. It's like
that seems pretty reasonable.
That's great. I'm glad they broke out of the mold on that one. But you segue into my next point, which I wrote down: let and var. Having immutable variables is great, and I don't know if static is the right word. I know the effect is the same, but
right.
Like PHP, can you just make a static variable in a function body and pass it around?
I don't know. I suspect you can.
Okay. I haven't actually tried that. I've never seen it. That's interesting. We'll look that up later. But yeah, I like so many of the variables we make are static. And it's just nice to convey your intent with that when you say, it's not about, and this is, I strongly dislike when people teach this in like CS1 and they're like, oh, we make things private so that other programmers don't go in and mess up your data. It's like, no. First of all, programmers aren't operating at runtime. Second of all, they can do whatever they want. You can do nothing to stop them. All you can do is try to make your architecture obvious. And when you say everything is private except these things which are public, that's way better than everything being public and no one having any idea what's internal and what's external. That's all. But so immutable is just a step beyond that. Making things private helps immutable from like an encapsulation standpoint. But people are going to change your code. They're going to open that class and do something with it. And if you can convey that x equals, not x, let's say timeout equals 500, that's not going to change. Just let timeout equal 500. We do not want to change this at runtime ever. It should always time out after 500 milliseconds or whatever. I like that a lot. And I miss that in PHP, though. I'll have to try static variables.
I mean, you could use a constant, right?
Maybe.
Isn't it effectively be? So I again, this is
Yeah.
a side effect of me not having used this for real stuff. But like the only thing I used let for was like what I would have used a constant for in PHP to have like a reference to this string that I was going to use as a like an identifier.
Static variables in PHP can be changed.
Right.
Yeah, so it is a const is more what let is equivalent to.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
The other really cool feature about Swift, and it's specific to Swift, it happens to be implemented in Xcode, is the playground and the REPL. I also noticed it just has a straight command line REPL, read, evaluate, print loop, similar to like Ruby or Python or the JavaScript console, which is great. I am so tied to using REPLs in development. It's almost obscene. I'm a little worried about ever having to do serious development in a static, in a compiled language, because it will suck. I use them all the time just to do quick things. Today, what was I doing today? Oh, we have this configuration framework, and the question was, if a key is not defined in the configuration, does it default to off or false? And you could sit around and think about that all day, or you could just like write 2 lines of code in the REPL and find out if it's true. Anyways, I like REPLs, but the playground is even cooler. Unfortunately, the playground is the thing we alluded to that does not work in my version of Xcode. Coley, if you go to File, New, Playground, does it even start up for you in Xcode?
Playground. It does.
Does it load anything?
There's
Mine just sat at a spinner all day long.
Oh, no, you're right. Mine's stuck.
Interesting.
Nothing is.
So the playground it's kind of like Light Table. If you've ever heard of Light Table, it's a graphical programming environment. I don't know if that's the right word. Colby, how would you describe? Because you've seen the videos, right?
Yeah, I have.
How would you describe it?
I mean, I guess that you can have, like, it shows you a visual representation of, like, what your program is doing, kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, like, sometimes that's numbers, or it can be anything as simple as numbers all the way up to, like, fully, like, progressing animations and, like game.
Yeah. So the simple example I did a couple weeks ago when this thing actually worked was like var, that's the non, var I equals 0 while true I plus plus, and this actually crashes it eventually. But while it's happening, next to your declaration of I, you can watch it increase. And so what I actually ended up doing was while true, sleep 1,000 I plus plus, and then every second you see the I increase, which is really cool. But it is so much more than that. You can run your iOS apps in the playground, I think. So you can, I think so. I think it allows you to drag the UI elements on and link them together and do things like that, which is seriously awesome.
It would be pretty cool if you could like change stuff and not have to like rebuild and run the simulator.
Right. So in the context, so say for us, we get this class, this data structure that represents the to-do list, and you just want to see if when you add something to it, it actually shows up in the list. So instead of having to wire up an add form, you could just, in the playground, change the list into something else and watch the UI element update in real time, which is really, I find, very valuable. And that's probably one of the better things about JavaScript, is that when you're developing the browser, you can do that. You can say, is this data structure correctly linked to this UI element? If I add something to it, does that thing change? Let me just, array.push and find out. So that's really powerful.
So in your travels, did you come across the assistant view?
No.
So
what is that?
It's one of on the top right of the Chrome. There are three buttons that hide the debug area, blah, blah, blah. But then to the left of those, there's one button that is like a diff view, so you can see your changes in source control. And next to it, there's what looks like this guy in a tuxedo with a bow tie.
Yep, I've clicked on it. Actually, I can share my screen and show everyone else.
Yeah. So basically what it does is it opens a split to the right of your to the right of the file you have open and automatically opens a relevant file based on the context of the file you're in. So if you're looking at the storyboard view and you select one of your controller view things, it'll open the view that controller. And if you're just looking at code, it'll open say that class is superclass or that class is header file or something. It's really awesome. I thought it was really neat.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and it's surprisingly useful. It almost always had the answer I was looking for.
Oh, yeah. So we have a similar... That's great. We have a problem at work right now where things are not obviously connected, and that's something I ran into in our implementation. My implementation was that it wasn't obvious how things are connected. It seemed magical. So why don't we just get into it? Shall we now pause for demos?
Yeah, let's do it.
Who do you think should go first, Colby?
I'll go first because yours is going to be better than mine.
I don't know about that. But proceed. I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right. I'll start sharing my screen. Sean, I apologize because this is one we didn't practice, but
gotta think on your feet. Gotta make him earn his keep.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, this is my to-do app. It's called Swift Do. So it's pretty simple. You click the plus and type in a new to-do list.
Oh, good. Right. I couldn't get the keyboard to come up either.
I could get the cursor to be in the box, but I couldn't get the keyboard to actually come up.
There was something to do with hiding the keyboard or something like that. Editing, begin editing calls on the view that I never got right. But anyways, cool. So yeah, that works.
Yeah. So I have to-dos. I tried to mess around. So I made it so if you mark one as done, it gets grayed out and moved to the bottom.
Oh. You surpassed my functionality already.
They reorder, and then you can undo them, and they'll get sent back to the top.
And how are you marking them as done? Just pressing on them?
So, yeah. So I just clicking or tapping, I guess, because you can't see my mouse clicks. But there's no way to delete them because I didn't get there. And they're not persisted in any way. So if you close the app, they're gone.
Yep, I have that problem too.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. That's
cool.
It was. I will say this was the most satisfying like when I finished, I didn't feel like I had no idea what was going on, which is pretty much how I felt every other time I tried to write an iOS app. So
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And do you think that was due to Swift?
yeah, I think so.
Cool.
I think it made it like there. I mean, there's still obviously some magic-y things. Like it's kind of unclear how like things in the storyboard view are like actually connected to the code.
Yeah.
And I did see like things online where people would like write out. They didn't use the storyboard. They like wrote out like. Or they didn't seem to be using the storyboard. They would just programmatically like define a table view.
Yeah, and I didn't understand how that worked. And one of the things that frustrated me, and maybe you can't like open up one of these views that you create on the storyboard and see the code, right? It's just magic. In fact, in version control, it saves this .storyboard file.
I thought there was a way. Oh, so if you go to in the inspector thing, if you go to the file inspector, there's the identity and type thing, and I think you can switch the type. And no.
Oh, interesting. I'll change it to LLVM assembly.
Never mind. I don't know what that does.
Okay, fair enough.
I thought there was a way that you could like view the source somehow, but
that seems like a thing you'd want to do. Broadly, I really liked Xcode as a development environment. It was pretty slick. It made things way easier, and it's pretty fast. And it doesn't use nearly as much memory as I expected. And the same goes for the simulator. But it is pretty magical. So when you're using the storyboard thing, or when I was playing around with core data and I was using the data modeler, it kind of works. But what always breaks down for me in those scenarios is when it doesn't work. When I can't like open up the code and see the entry points and what's actually happening, then I'm reduced to guesswork and frantic Googling, which is never fun, but is usually effective. But wasn't effective here because Swift is so new. So oftentimes all the examples you'd find would be Swift Objective-C examples, or they would be Objective-C examples where they would auto-gen the core data class, which would be written in Objective-C at that point, which I felt was cheating, so I didn't do it. Let me dive into sharing mine. The iOS simulator is awesome. So here's mine. I couldn't get the top nav plus button to actually link to my other view, so I scrapped it and I made a tab view which auto links these buttons for you. So it switches between the views automatically. I don't know why I couldn't get it to work. I just couldn't. So this is real janky.
There was some weirdness like linking the views where there's this like segue thing which I don't entirely understand, that for whatever reason doesn't quite work right in Swift.
Is that the thing where you have to like control click on the element in the storyboard and then drag something to something else?
There was that, and then like in the view you had to like do an Objective-C header file and apply it to your Swift class.
Yeah, so you like at obj-c and then something, right?
Yeah. We can look at it in my code later, but
okay.
It was kind of weird, but like I did it and it seemed to work.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I had a bunch of those floating around from Googling that I didn't really understand what they were. So go get some eggs. I also couldn't get the keyboard to come up. This is a description. Click add task. It pops you over to the other view and you see it there.
Whoa.
You're going to add some other things. Plan next episode of Change Mode. Talk to Colby about that. Add task. And I can delete things.
Aw, dang.
Which I guess is kind of like marking things as done.
Yeah.
But they don't gray out or anything. They just get deleted. And that is it. If I had a lot, I could scroll these. That's all she wrote.
Nice. I like it. Now, you use core data, right?
I tried to, so this doesn't persist.
Okay.
So, yeah, let me walk through. I'll stop sharing because this isn't very interesting.
Actually, could you briefly tell me what core data is? Because it's something I always hear like the iOS engineers at work bitching about, and I don't really understand.
Sure. Let me walk through what my thoughts were first, because this is actually a good story. So, my first thought was, I'm using the Xcode beta. I'm programming in Swift. Why don't I just store the to-dos in the cloud using CloudKit, and then it'll be synced across all the instances of the app as were installed. This would be great. I don't care that they delete the data every month now or whatever it is, because it's just a fun thing. It doesn't matter. So if you go into Xcode, I can actually show this. Here's how you would do that. So you'd go in like the top project level thing, and then you go to capabilities.
Yep.
And you'll see iCloud, and you expand that one. Nope, that's not it.
Dan, we're having issues with your screen sharing coming through. Can you turn it off and turn it back on?
I can turn it off and turn it back on. Stop screen sharing.
Do it again.
How does that look?
Looks good to me.
Better.
Better. Okay, it's pretty small. But then you check this CloudKit box, which, again, Xcode magic. It will do some stuff. So I check the box, and then it's going to go off and do this thing. And then I get this error message.
Dan, I see your Chrome and not
What?
Xcode.
Skype, what are you doing? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. I'll read the error message. I'll do a dramatic reading. Your iOS development certificate for Etsy Incorporated was not found on the Member Center. Xcode can submit a certificate signing request on your behalf. Would you like Xcode to do so now? No. Please, I don't know what this is, but I'm sure my company doesn't want me using CloudKit. So, no, I'm not going to do that. Turn it off. Shut it down. Shut it down. So that put the kibosh on my CloudKit plans. So then I was like, I'll use this core data thing. So as far as I understand, core data is kind of like an ORM, but it's not relational. It's just the OM part. So it's mapping objects into like hard drive, basically.
Okay.
There's no relational component. So you have an object, it inherits from NS object, and then you can basically call .save on it and persist it to disk, and you can call it out later through some basic key value-esque queries. No relations though. The problems I had with this were what I mentioned before. All of the information online about core data is either Objective-C or it's using the built-in thing that generates a core data thing for you from the model thing. Maybe I'll try sharing my screen again, but I don't know. I'll try it one more time, Sean and Colby. You let me know if it's broken. Oh, that was my Chrome window. Sorry, I selected the wrong one. That explains so much. It looked pretty similar because I have a spreadsheet open in Chrome, and this looks a lot like a spreadsheet. So this is the data modeler, and it looks like what are those database things called?
ER
ER diagrams, entity relationship diagrams.
Yes.
So you can just draw these out. Like my to-do model has a description and a name, and it can actually have relationships. I read specifically that it didn't have relationships though. Anyways, and then you could draw lines between these, and it would just generate code. You can also see it in table form that you can magically use somehow. But here is my class, and I wanted to use the class I had already written. So I had just written a class that had internally an array data structure, and I had this add task function right here, and I would pass in the name and the description. It would basically push that onto the array, and we could use it. And I just wanted to extend this functionality to also persist that array every so often. Maybe when I wanted to play around with detecting when the app is like backgrounded or something, and we could just make sure it's good. But the problems with that were that I couldn't find anything about using core data with Swift that wasn't using it through Objective-C, and also was current with the current version of Swift, because I did something and I was like, oh, this call is deprecated, and then I had to look through the comments, and it didn't work. And eventually I arrived at the point where it was like I think it was NS managed object context, or just NS managed context is not defined. And I was like, oh yeah, actually you can see the error here. NS managed object class task manager, because you have to give core data a context in which to store it, which I was told is kind of like a database conceptually, sort of like a core data instance. But I didn't know why that didn't exist, because it just looked like something that I would inherit from NS object when I got from that. So, anyways, I couldn't get it to work. But that's what that's what core data is, from what I understand.
Interesting. Okay, good to know. Thanks.
So should we do code walkthroughs? Is there anything else we want to talk about? Well, I guess I'll dive in to the code walkthrough. It'll be really quick because we're actually running out of time. So one of the things I really liked are all these empty callbacks. This is a function that is called when your application launches, so you can do things here. I like that they put it there and that it does nothing, so that I can easily see that functionality is available instead of just doing nothing with it. Application did enter background. This is where I wanted to do the core data stuff. Application will enter foreground, became active. All that stuff's awesome. This is in the app delegate, which is kind of like the top level, the main method of your app, if you will. The views also had this. View did load, just calls up to the parent view did load, but it's there. You can see it, and you know that that's what you want. Another cool thing about Xcode that I noticed, you end up inheriting from all these other classes to get, table view, for example. So what are the methods I need to implement for table view? You can command click on this, and it opens up table view. And you can see the protocol and look at the descriptions for all the functions that are required, which are 2, and then all the other ones which are optional. And I thought that was pretty neat too. But basically, table view. If I am deleting a cell, then remove that from the database and then reload the data. But that looked really slick, right? The screen didn't flash, so there's some magic happening there where I reload the data, but it kind of diffs the data against itself. That's right here. Oh, here's a comment I wrote. Wait, this can have spaces between if and this. So I'm pretty sure if I do this, I get a compiler error. Nope. I don't know what I was talking about there.
You also don't need. I'm pretty sure you don't need parens in your if statements.
Oh, really, Mr. Colby? Oh, yeah. Would you look at that? I prefer them. Cool. Yeah. For the table view, set, each text, this was another thing that was weird. Cell.textLabel.text equals a string instead of cell.textLabel equals string. I didn't understand why you needed to specifically say that text label and detail text label dot text, or both of them, gets assigned a thing.
I suspect it's because like text label is like a. I'm going to talk about it like the DOM, but like a p tag or something, right? And the p tag equals
right.
Like you would set inner HTML or something like that.
Yeah.
But I agree. I had that same problem. I tried to set text on cell, and it was like, oh, hell no.
Yeah. This is my one that is the add view. Again, it has the same empty overrides, which I really am a fan of. Some magic IB action. I don't know what that is. I had to have it. Function, add button, and click. Sender. I don't really know. This might have even been auto-generated. Senders and the delegates was a concept that I was totally confused about, and I kind of just crossed my fingers and hope that they are wired up the right way. Do you have any insight on senders and delegates, Colby? No.
Not really. I mean, I would assume sender is like the button that initiated the click, like the source of the action.
But why do I need that?
I mean, you probably don't need it, but it might be useful to have, like if you wanted to change it.
Yeah. I guess it just doesn't make sense in mine. Right. This was nice. We'll get my task manager is where all the real data is. I instantiate a task manager somewhere. Where do I do that? Interesting. I have no idea. Somehow I made task manager a global, I guess. I have that add task function that I showed. This is where I set view to end editing to try to get the thing to show up, but maybe I needed to call start editing or something. I reset the boxes. We entered the text, the task and the description into back to empty string, and I switched our tab view over to view 0 instead of view 1. This was more me trying to get the keyboard to show up. It feels like that should be a default thing. And I'm pretty sure this was more me trying to do that too.
So I did something completely different and got the same behavior. Oh no, I did. Wait, no. I did this thing where it like in view did appear. I like made the text field the first responder, and that like.
Do you mean view did load or view did appear?
View did appear. Well, I tried view did load and it didn't show the keyboard, and I tried view did appear and it also didn't show the keyboard.
Crazy. Yeah. You'd think if you entered into a text box, that would be the default behavior, because on an actual iOS device, 99% of the time, if you're entered into a text box without the keyboard, you won't be able to do anything at all. So it feels like that should be the default behavior.
It is the case that like, so I know this is the case in browser, and I'm pretty sure this is in the case like more generally in iOS, because I've heard this can be a pain. And also on Android, like the touch devices have lots of restrictions about when you can programmatically show the keyboard, which is kind of a user experience thing. Like, it would be pretty crappy if you could just thrash the keyboard up and down, right? even if it was accidental. So in the web browser, for example, you can only show the keyboard within the context of a click event or like a touch event.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be like native. It has to be like within that call stack, basically. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So it could be something like that, some sort of like race condition that we don't understand.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
So my tab controller on this storyboard created these two views and linked them with the delegate thing automatically. So I actually don't understand how this works. It involves control clicking from different elements here onto other things, and it brings up this menu, and you have the triggered segues, which it did for me.
I use the nav view, and I suspect. So, given that you had to like clear out your text boxes, I suspect the difference might be that both of your views are like alive and kicking at the same time.
Okay.
Whereas my views using the nav thing, the view I was navigating to was not like was killed. Was killed when it was not like it wasn't alive. Because I didn't have to clear out my text boxes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought it was weird that I had to clear them out. Yeah. Totally bizarre. Yeah. Last one, we looked at this. It's the only class I wrote by hand from scratch, which was actually... Oh, that's where I declare task manager. Right. Yes. So if you... in any of your classes that are loaded, if you declare global, it's global to all, which was weird, as I just demonstrated, because I totally forgot that was the case, and I just wrote this 3 days ago. Structs, awesome. Didn't need to write a task class because it didn't really deserve it. It had no associated behavior. This NS managed stuff, I don't know. I had to have it. The compiler was like, you should add this, and I said, okay. The parentheses after declaring an array was weird, and this was another thing that's changed in the most recent version. The syntax for declaring an array of types used to be different, and now it's this, where you say var tasks equals bracket task, an array of tasks, parentheses. I'm pretty sure if I delete these parentheses, it gets upset, and it says expected member name or constructor call after type name. Add arguments after the type to construct a value. It takes nothing, so I guess normally here you would specify what parameters go into each of instance in that list. But whatever. And functions, great. We have types on each of the calls, and we can push, append things to the list. Also, I believe, this is something else. I believe Swift has named arguments are required. It's not optional. So I couldn't just pass in name and description here. I had to say assign name to the value name in this scope and assign description to the value description in this scope, which is one way of doing that. Yeah, we can talk about named parameters some other time. But I like that they were just like, you know what, it's required. Enough about me, though. All you now, Colby.
Right. Mine was pretty similar. Oops, not what I meant to do. Nope, come back. There we go. I'll share my screen now. Or not.
Skype, what are you doing?
Oh, I had to scroll down. I did not see the scroll bar there. Alright, I didn't do anything in this app delegate file.
Yeah, I don't think I did either.
I have my storyboard thing.
Whoa, your storyboard looks cooler.
One thing I found pretty confusing is the navigation controller view.
Maybe that's what I was missing, because I definitely didn't have that when I tried to do it.
You had to do some weird thing where you selected your view, and then there was this in the menus it was an embed in navigation controller something.
I remember seeing that.
I didn't really get it. This is my add view controller, which is pretty basic. This is where I do the did appear where I was trying to focus the text field somewhat unsuccessfully. So this segue stuff I don't understand at all. This is the thing that does the transition between, or it handles transitions to and I think so. This handles the transition back to the other view. So I believe the segue passes data between view controllers. That's the sense I got, because you can see. So I come into this prepare for segue, checks if it's the sender. If it's not the sender, it's whatever, I don't care. Or I'm sorry, it checks if the add button is the thing that initiated this segue, and if it is, it checks one, if the text field has anything in it, and then I guess adds a to-do item. So this is one thing I found weird. This was probably the tutorial I was following and not what I would have done. I think I would have tried to pass this data along with the. Maybe you can't. So what's happening here is that my table view controller gets a reference to the view controller, I guess, in this unwind to list, which again seems to be some convention. This was a function I had to define in my header file, and I don't quite understand why. But I assume it's something predefined that is missing in Swift or something. I don't know, but in any case, I get a reference to the add view controller here, and then I grab the to-do item from it and append it to my list, which is all fine and good, I think. Yeah, I mean, this isn't too exciting. It's a lot of changing the color, changing the color of the rows, based on whether or not that it's completed. I have my Swift do item class thing, which I did not use struct. This was again a product of the tutorial I was following.
Gotcha.
I didn't write this myself. Yeah, I think that's the meat of it, though. It was kind of cool. I'd be interested to read about structuring applications and how to do things like that, because it feels I can see how things could get out of hand pretty easily. And I'd be interested to see how.
What do you mean things get out of hand? What are you fearing?
How you pass data between views, and how you maintain common state across views and update views based on state and things. Because we hit on doing mobile web stuff in JS, we run into, I would imagine, similar problems. So I'd be interested to see how people who know what they're doing architect larger systems. I think it'd be cool to see.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I have to imagine it's better than what you just described. It seems like passing data between views should be a well-supported, defined behavior.
Right. And I'm sure it is, but I just don't understand it.
Indeed. And here on Change Mode, we're all about not understanding things. In fact, I would go so far as to say that we are professional beginners.
Yeah.
What else did we say here? Again, the simulator is amazing. It's so much better than the Android simulator. It's so lightweight. It's so fast. It works really well. That's my favorite part about this.
So I will say, like, I've known the joys of the iOS simulator for a long time because I use it to test, like, websites because you can use Safari, but not only can you use Safari, but you can hook it up to the WebKit debugger and you get a, like, full-featured WebKit debugger in the iOS simulator, which is effectively like running on device. And it's pretty amazing. Like, you can do profiling, you can see all the crazy, like, memory stuff. You can, like, you get the visual, like, when you hover over DOM elements in the DOM tree, they, like, highlight in the iPhone simulator. It's pretty great. So, yeah, I agree. Change your life.
Yeah, totally. Any last thoughts on the experience of using Swift to write a to-do list app? Was it easier than you thought? Harder than you thought? Pleasurable?
It was easier than I thought, bordering on pleasurable. Once I found...
That's pretty much all you can ask in programming. Just approaching pleasurable is all we really want.
Right. I think I stopped slightly before the point where my ignorance started screwing me over. So, like, but
cool.
Yeah,
I would agree. I thought I would have to spend way more time on it, and I was sinking a lot of time into getting what you got to work. But once I got the tab view, it was pre-segued for me. It was smooth sailing. And I guess I got around the data passing problem by making my data global, because the task manager object was a global thing, and so the state was shared, which is gives me the heebie-jeebies, but it worked. It was a hack, and it worked.
I mean, sometimes that's okay, right? Like, in a way, your state is global, and it is common amongst the apps.
It's fine for an app with 2 views, I think.
Yes. I mean, if you think about that global task manager as your database in a way on your client, that seems okay, right? I guess it's a matter of how you manage it, like how you handle it. But yeah, nice.
Totally.
Yeah. We'll have to read. Maybe do we have friends who do iPhone? Joey does iPhone things in his spare time.
Does he?
Yeah. He's been working on an app.
Oh, I had no idea.
It's true.
I have to talk to them. Actually, the Swift Developers Meetup, the Brooklyn Swift Developers Meetup, is held at Etsy, and I went to the last one, and I meant to go to the one tonight before the show, but I totally forgot. Their second meeting was tonight. So I do know some folks. It's very new. No one really has any idea what they're doing.
Right.
But at least with Cocoa, which is the framework that wraps all these view delegates and controllers, and I think that's understood. I think. Maybe no one understands. All right, so excellent show. Thank you again, Colby. This has been another excellent episode of the Change Mode Show, Swift Challenge, episode 6. Just a reminder to everyone, check out coffeeandbeer.tv for future, present, and past episodes of this show and other amazing shows, including Don't Panic. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you for the next episode in the indeterminate future.
This show is brewed fresh weekly by the Coffee and Beer Podcast Network. Get all our shows at our website, coffeeandbeer.tv.